So I don't really make YouTube videos. I've only made a couple. I've never really jumped on and engaged in the YouTube community. I have made a lot of TikToks and that has always been my primary platform. But once I saw how well I did on that point platform organically, I was like, you know what? Let me venture into these other ones. I seem to be pretty good at social media. I love to send certain messages to people that are watching my things, and I don't know, I really just like to engage with people. So here I am. Honestly, I wanted to make a video today because I really just get more and more irritated the more that I watch and or listen to the audio that has to do with my situation with what happened, and just going to talk about something that was irritating me today. So let's jump into it. So honestly, I just avoid this kind of thing, and I've been sitting here listening to everything that was said. I have listened to the internal affairs interview audio numerous amounts of times. And the more I listen to it, the more irritated I get because of either the omitting of certain facts, the flat out lying, just like the discrepancies. And then, not to mention, you throw in the lieutenant who's doing the internal affairs, how he is coaching and leading and holding his hand the entire way. And it makes me think if he did this during my internal affair, right? Because this lieutenant is the only lieutenant at that department who does the internal affair investigations. And if he will do that to me and my case, it makes you question, well, how many other complaints has he done the same, right? So the more I hear it, the hotter I get because these lies, they're just blatant lies. And at some point, you get tired of staying quiet. And while these other people are out here, what I like to call rewriting their reality, eventually that catches up to you, right? So they say it's easy to tell the truth. And that is the truth. It is easy to tell the truth. You'll always be able to tell that somebody is telling the truth because their story will never change, right? There might be some small, but the big factors like the days and the times and who is involved and the big things that go into a situation, those will always remain the same, right? But one thing you'll notice with people that are lying, and it doesn't have to be law enforcement, anybody, but we're just talking about this because it happens to be about law enforcement. One way that when somebody is lying is their inability to keep their story the same, right? So you start out with one story, and all right, let's just say, for instance, the arrest report. And clearly, the officer in my case went into what he thought was great detail. He probably sat there and took several hours and ChatGPT'd it and looked up the laws, wording of the laws, what was it that he had to say in order to cover for himself and to make it look as good as he possibly could in this situation. And I think this arrest report was 13 pages long. Why I was grouped into the arrest report with my son, I don't know, because I honestly feel like the situation with my son should have been totally separate from what this officer did to me, but nonetheless, I'm grouped in there as well. I'm sure is it some sort of image attempt to make me look almost like guilty by association to the community. A lot of the times as human beings, we have, I wouldn't say the ability, but we tend to, as human beings, subconsciously relate individuals to who they are around and the behaviors of those around them or what they're doing, etc. So it is normally a manipulation tactic to group someone of innocence into a situation or a scenario where there's allegations of wrongdoing. So I honestly think that's what happened in my case, but nonetheless, he went into what he thought was great detail. He omitted very important facts, but admitted to other things. And then you go and you would get into the different warrants that the warrant affidavits that he applied for. For instance, the warrant affidavit to the judge. He did not tell the judge that it was not my son's home, that it was my home. He did not tell the judge that he had already forced entry and that he had arrested the homeowner and detained her entire family, including her minor children. He did not mention that, and nonetheless, he was granted a warrant. So there's very important facts that he said these things to people in charge. It likely would not have played out in his favor, and I think he knew that. It's better to, what is it? They say that it is better to do what you want instead of asking for permission and then just ask for forgiveness later. And I think that's what he did in this situation. Then I was able to obtain the internal affairs audio, which why they did not send me the video for this internal affairs, I would say it's beyond me, but it's really not. I probably sat there with papers in front of them and had this all coordinated out before they even hit record on the audio. So no, it doesn't surprise me, given the way that the audio went. And my very great friend James is actually going to do a video on this, and he is going to play the entire internal affair audio and go over it and break it down and dissect it and compare it and go into the law and legal backing and all of that. So I won't get into all of that detail because I don't have a legal background. But there are things in it that bother me, just like a couple very specific things. For instance, he said that he arrested my son and then took him to the car and admitted that he said things and questioned him things again about his phone. But very conveniently, he left out the fact that my son pled the fifth and asked for an attorney. So you implicated yourself, essentially, officer, by saying that you did question him and you did say these things, but for whatever reason, you left out the fact that my son pled the fifth, whether that be you didn't think anybody was gonna have video or obtain video, or you just get so much tunnel vision being emotionally dysregulated that you generally maybe don't remember that he pled the fifth. I don't know what the excuse is. Nonetheless, you didn't include it. There are other instances where first the sheriff's department said they did a protective sweep. And honestly, I think that was very impulsive, what they thought damage control, make this family look as crappy as possible, and then the community won't be upset about what our officer did, right? But they kind of harmed themselves in a way by doing that because then I think this officer realized, shoot, you know what? What I did was not legal and I shouldn't have done this. And now I need to find a way to cover my ass. And that's what he attempted to do. So initially, he tried to claim exigency, which if he was going to claim that, even though very arguably, because it's not true, can be disputed, he probably should have just, I don't know, kept his mouth shut and stopped doing, limited what he said, because he thought in the reports or these warrant affidavits or these internal affairs, if you were to look at some of these documents, he genuinely thought it was a good idea to go into as much detail as he could about either different lies or what, and he actually is just burying himself. There was a part in the internal affairs video where he essentially just throws out his excuse of exigency because what Mills said to claim the exigent circumstance was that he believed that my son had a phone and that the phone might be destroyed, right? That was his entire basis, right? He suspected that he had a phone. He feared the phone could be destroyed. And then he used that to justify entering my home without a search warrant. So listening to the IA, and this is why it's not a legitimate exigency, for it to be valid, from my understanding, under the Fourth Amendment, he must have probable cause plus a real immediate and clearly defined threat and not something speculative, hypothetical, or based on his own anger and emotional dysregulation, right? So, and what Mills actually had was no confirmation that a phone existed. He had no confirmation that it contained any evidence. He had no indication that anyone was destroying anything. And he was acting in retaliation because my son asserted his rights to remain silent. Courts have repeatedly said that mere speculation that evidence might be destroyed is not exigency. Exigency requires real-time destruction, not a guess, not a maybe, not a I think he might have something. And in my case, he didn't even know if the phone existed, right? After he got the warrant, he's on camera asking people, Do you know what kind of phone I'm looking for? Do you know if it's an Apple, if it's an Android? Do you know what color it is? Right. So he didn't even know what it was that he was looking for. So we got the fact that he got mad because my son wouldn't talk, and I was actively speaking up, not just for my rights, but for my son when I overheard them being violated again. And these are not extended circumstances, right? That's retaliation and unlawful entry. So you get to the IA video and or audio, and the lieutenant is holding his hand, and you can just tell that I don't know if he's been trained to be this type of person or officer, or if he's just had enough experience helping officers get out of really twisted situations. But he would literally lay out scenarios that he would speculate to have happened or speculate to as if he were thinking for meals, right? And he said to him, "Oh, so this went from Friday night to Saturday night." And so he said it went from Friday night to Saturday night, and because he was able to identify the suspect, i.e., my son, during that time frame, and that he physically saw my son go from a vehicle in the driveway into my residence, and that he said he suspected the phone was going to be in his possession. I need y'all to understand something again, and I want to reiterate, and another thing that they left out, Officer Mills was not at my home to speak to my son, to arrest my son, to search my son, to do anything in regards to my son. He did not find out any additional information about my son between the time he spoke with my son at Papa John's and the time he drove to my house. My point behind that is if you had enough probable cause to arrest my son, you should have done it at Papa John's. These arresting my son at my house and have not seen the warrant affidavit for his warrant for arrest. So, given the fact that I've seen the warrant for my house, I'm going to say it's probably damn near similar to what he was granted for here, right? I'm going to say that he probably didn't have probable cause to arrest my son. Not at Papa John's, not at my house. He only did so because he knew whoever this judge was that was handing out warrants on Andy was going to give it to him, regardless of what he did or didn't say. And the moment I refused and inserted my rights because I did not want to talk to him and I did not want him at my house without the proper warrants, he got mad. And he can downplay it all he wants to in the internal affair audio and his reports. Fact of the matter is he came to my home. He, first of all, the level of detail that he goes into with these flock cameras and these just DOT cameras and the level of he calls investigation, to me, it seems very stalkerish, very to the point where he brought up the fact that the police were called to my house several months ago about a vacuum cleaner. It was just a little dispute or whatever. But he said before he came to my home to talk to me that he not only looked all of that up, but he watched the body camera for that incident. That is the level of creepiness. And then he comes to my house and he asks me if I remember him. He left that out. First in his report, he tried to put that I remembered him. I didn't know who he was. That right there is a red flag. And when I would not talk with him, he said in his IA that he was hoping that I would snitch on my son. He got mad. He got visibly annoyed and mad, and it was retaliation to arrest my kid. And so that's what he did. But nonetheless, if you have the proper warrants, if you're doing it lawfully, who am I to say or do anything? I didn't have anything to do with that situation anyway. So I thought I was taking a lawful order when I was told to get my son that he was under arrest. I think they call that like constructive order because as a citizen, I think that I'm doing what I'm required to do by law. Come to find out, this officer should have had two warrants to be at my home, a search warrant and an arrest warrant for my son, and he did not. All he had was an arrest warrant. So there's that. But he said in the IA that came back and told me that I needed to get out or get everybody out of the house. And he said something about he told me there was evidence, and that's not what he said. He said contraband. Then he said all I kept doing was yelling at him. And then the lieutenant interjected himself in this audio and was like, oh, from what I remember and what I saw, she just kept yelling at you and you were trying to be respectful. And this internal affairs officer, who is supposed to be totally unbiased and just doing his job, is literally sitting there helping him create this cover story, and he is essentially passive aggressively bashing me as this potential victim in this interview. It's actually disgusting to listen to. So obviously, Officer Mills is agreeing. And then he's like, I asked her to get everybody out, and I gave her the opportunity to go in there and get them out so that I didn't have to. Oh, but you claimed exigency. It was an emergency. But you were asking me and you were giving me the opportunity to do it for you. And then he went on to say there was kids in there who were not a threat. And then he went on to say, and then there was Taylor, which is my son's girlfriend, and which makes sense that she would have the phone. Why would she not? That's his girlfriend, and they live together. Well, why didn't you get a search warrant for her instead of my house? Why didn't you know what I mean? You're just trying to backtrack after you're trying to use everything that he did after all the unlawful and illegal things that he did to justify all of those terrible things. That is what he's doing. He unlawfully detained my children and my family, would not let them leave the porch, told them they could not leave. They could not leave the porch, they could not leave the house. He said in the IA video that he made them pull out their phones so that he could call all of their phones. He made them show their pockets. He was in the middle of doing a warrantless search on my teenage son when finally he got the phone, I think, from the chair where Taylor was sitting. And just amidst all these things, and Lieutenant's just, and then summed it up with this whole entire, let me see if I have it. So he summed it up with this entire paragraph, right? Let me read it. And this is the transcript from the IA interview. I pulled the transcript. So this is Lieutenant Barone. He goes, and some circumstances went from Friday night to Saturday night because you were able to identify him between that time frame, right? And place them at a different location, right? And you physically saw that person, your suspect, go from a vehicle in the parking lot, I'm sorry, the driveway, into the residence. Right. And you suspected what the phone was going to be in his possession. And the next thing you see when you actually place them under arrest is he's got what on his hand is a phone number that was written there that you and Mills said right. And that tells you what? That he probably took numbers out of his cell phone he was holding on his arm and then handed the cell phone over to somebody or hid that cell phone. So that tells you I need to go ahead and secure this scene. I don't have time to go back to the precinct, create a search warrant, get it signed, and then come back to the residency because of what? The bag that it was probably going to get destroyed or lost or hidden. Or so you decide to go ahead and secure the scene. Ask somebody out of the house. Ask everybody. So he says he asked everybody out of the house, which is not what happened. And you didn't receive too much cooperation. Those weren't Mills' words. That I kid you not, that is what Lieutenant Barone said. And Officer Mills just goes, right. He didn't even have to talk because Lieutenant Barone was doing it all for him. It was absolutely disgusting what they do in that department. The way they'll cover up for each other is just, it's something. But I have a feeling because I tend to be a relentless person, and especially when people are hurt, innocent people are hurt. This is one thing that hasn't been discussed very much, but a couple days after he did this at my house, he is friends with the school resource officer at my son's school. And apparently, the school psychologist there is friends with the school resource officer. So it's this big informant triangle. And my 9-year-old, believe it or not, has a 504 disability protection at school. He was already diagnosed before this incident, has several different things, but one of them being severe anxiety and depression. He was in the middle of some testing and evaluations that had to do with that when this happened at my house. And he was expressing the trauma that he obtained from this situation to his psychologist during testing, who then disclosed it to the school resource officer, who then asked the school resource officer to have Officer Mills give her a call while she was at school with my son on her cell phone so that she could relay this information, all of which information that had literally nothing to do with my kid. And it was simply just used to try to help a criminal investigation. Officer Mills then took every ounce of that information, including my son's name, his school, his relation, his psychologist teacher's name, the school resource, all of this identifying and educational information, disability information, and put it into a search warrant affidavit to try to get the video from my home, and was able to obtain a warrant. And I had a very kind stranger, but nonetheless a stranger, reach out to me who had obtained that warrant, and it was not redacted and had all of my son's information in it, which I have filed complaints. But when I complained to the school, they pacified me and didn't even do a formal complaint. And then I had found out, so I had to take it to the district level. And supposedly they're investigating it, which I don't know why it's taking a month and it's so difficult, because they have a copy of the warrant to see this is exactly what was said. Don't know why the officer is still at that school. Do not know why the psychologist is still at that school, whether or not you let them maintain their job with the district. I feel like subjecting to my son to those individuals every day is very traumatizing. He found out what they did to him, and he actually started fainting. I don't know the medical term right off the top of my head, but it is triggered and caused by extreme stress and trauma. And it started after that incident. Whenever he is extremely scared or something really bad happens, he will actually faint, just automatically just passes out. His blood pressure drops and he passes out. Every time we go to the school resource officer is there, and he is asking me, can you take me to jail? He's very scared. We went this morning, matter of fact, and the officer's vehicle was there, and he's like, why is he even here? And they don't seem to care. And I think it's really upsetting. They're not, the severity of what they did and the trauma that it caused my 9-year-old. A little bit different for adults, but we have a little more understanding and comprehension of the long term what's going on, but not my kid. So this officer won't stop. And the amount of flock usage that he uses is concerning. And I don't know the legalities behind it. I don't know if we have any laws or regulations in place in regards to that. I think a lot of it has to do with ignorance. I don't think the community is very aware of flock cameras and what they do in regards to your privacy and coming and going and this and that. And I think that's a concern, because I was ignorant to the fact and ignorant to the situation before this. Just reading all the documents that he fills out and the length of extent that he goes through, where 90%, I think, of his different investigations and what he does is sitting on a computer going through cameras, flock cameras or DOT cameras, or, and it's concerning. It's almost, we're living in a police state. So I don't know. Anyway, I've never done YouTube videos, and I just wanted to jump on here and give a rant and just, I don't know, get it out. I know I've been on a lot of platforms, and I am so incredibly thankful for everybody that has given little old me a voice and is helping me, not just my family, but the community in and of itself, because I have a feeling that we're not the only ones that this has happened to. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it is a sheriff's department who is an elected official, and there are not enough checks and balances. If the sheriff decides that they're not going to do anything about it, normally that's where it ends. You can't get GBI. You can't get posts at the county level. You can't get, normally it's the district attorney and them are all, they're friends. I've emailed the district attorney multiple times. I can't even get a response. And this was before I retained a lawyer, before all these different things. So it just really gets dirtier and dirtier. I feel like it gets dirty and dirtier the more you dig. And it's concerning. And I'm really thankful for what everybody does for me. And I wanted to get in here and say that because I can't reach out to everybody. So if by chance you see my video, I appreciate you. But I'm gonna jump off here, try to get something done. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me rant.